happens. Whatever programs we do, people never come to the front. The first 2 or 3 rows are always empty. Now, I always have the privilege of being either one of the interviewees, so I never get to help people to come to the front. But thank you all for doing that. So it's 7:20. We're only running 5 minutes late, and that's not too bad for a British Hindu. Thank you. Today is going to be something which is going to be very unique. This is not just a normal panel conversation. Firstly, I would like to thank each and every one of you for taking so much time out, your precious schedules. We've got people here all the way from Dubai. Hands up from Dubai. Yes, there we go, right at the back. Actually, that's not 2 at the back, otherwise you'd have to come to the front. We have people from other parts of the country. We have someone from America. Where is our American Yankee friend? Doesn't look like a Yankee, but he is a Yankee. And we also have South Africa. Where is our friend from South Africa? There we go, you see? And they're all looking Indians, okay? So it doesn't matter where you're from, you all look very similar, absolutely. Thank you all. It means so much for me to say how pleased and honored I am that you've joined us today. So I'm just going to give a bit of background as to the purpose of today's panel discussion. So the host of this home, Mr. Agarwal, I met him during Janmashtami, the birth of Lord Krishna, in August. And he said to me, you know, Surinder, you know my background and how I somehow made ends meet. And in his own words, by the grace of God, I've now been given this opportunity and this privilege. And I would like to extend my life sacrifices, my journeys to upcoming leaders and other young people who are embarking on a career. And in fact, he told me the topic. And he said to me, let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation with people from the spectrum of generations. And let's discuss how to have a successful career. Actually, no. He said, let's discuss how to have a successful career and an ethical career. Because that's really at the heart of Mr. Agarwal. And therefore, it brings me such a great honor to say that our panelists here today, in my own limited understanding, and of course, my mentors and my guides, they have nominated a very specific panel which we believe are going to provide you with very unique journeys. And these journeys are journeys which are going to cross the spectrum of material success, or if I can say, at the height of material success, and also clearly, as you can see, spiritual as well. Is it possible to have a successful career and be ethical? Is it possible to reach the heights of success and at the same time not compromise your values, your culture, and your own ethics? It's a question which I'm sure most of you have asked yourself, others. I ask this question to myself every day, and I'm still asking that question, which is why today's panel conversation, it's very much for myself and all of you here today. So before I introduce our panelists, I'll just tell you about the timings for today. So we're going to have an interview with our panelists until about 8:15. And then after that, we're going to do a Q&A to about 10 to 9, and then we will end for a buffet. So that'll be our timings. And of course, if it gets very enthusiastic, then forget the timings, we just keep on going to as long as you would like. So that's going to be today's structure. So just very quickly, all of you have been briefed. You all have the bios of our panelists, so I would not take too much of your time in repeating some of those. But I would just like to share very briefly that firstly, it is such an honor to have somebody with us who, for me, is very much my corporate, my life mentor. Our first panelist is someone who rose to a level of success, and I can tell you, before many of us were born, a time where it was very difficult for anyone of an Indian origin to have any position of directorship. My first panelist has in fact dedicated, not 10, 20 or 30, but next year happens to be 50 years, half a century of his life in the corporate circles, 44 years of which dedicated to HSBC. Can I please ask you all to join me in welcoming Mr. Zed Kama. Our second panelist is very interesting, in fact. If we look at the A generation, there was a time where all of us know the history of India and how, it was one by one, we had people coming in, groups of people coming in, trying to take over the country, trying to create revolutions. But there was something which did not move, and that was the heart of India's spiritual culture. But yet, very few took to it seriously. Our second panelist is somebody who, just like ourselves, went to university and, in fact, studied in Germany. But while studying, in the very same way that we did, he heard his spiritual calling. A calling which was so deep and so profound that he did something which I, and certainly many people who I know, were completely afraid to do. To give up your independence, to give up and surrender your life, to dedicate it to the life of others. And he has been doing this for over 40 years of his life. This person has grown to be a mentor and a guide and a spiritual leader for tens and thousands of people. He does not stay, I can tell you this, he does not stay in any country for more than a few days, and that's year on year on year. This person, in my eyes, is very unique because at the age of, I believe, about 31, at such a young age, he was recognized by a saint who walked amongst us not too long ago. And this saint has very much given a lot of the things that we now take for granted. Vegetarianism was unheard of until Swami Prabhupada left India to go to the West. The worship of the deity. In fact, even when you say the name Krishna or Ram, these things were unheard of. They were not fashionable. He made it a fashion. He made it a household name. And Swami Prabhupada, when he recognized this person, on the day of giving him the renounced order of life, that sacred position wherein a dedicated Hindu, a saint, a follower of the Vedic culture, renounces their life for the welfare of the entire planet. At that time, he approved and he gave him the facility and the seal of approval to now lead this institution. It's very difficult at that age to be given that level of responsibility. There are innumerable initiatives that he carries out globally. Not only Indians, but there are followers and disciples of practically every language and every culture on the surface of this world. This person, not only does he carry out and create a revolution of consciousness, a change in consciousness, but he also has so much affection and love for those who are underprivileged. Just one out of many of his initiatives. Some of you know that children in India who are from extreme poor families, they don't go to school because they need to beg for food. This person has an initiative which feeds over 23,000 children a day in India so they can get an education and go to school. It is such an honor and a privilege to have amongst us here tonight His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. Thank you very much, Swamiji. It means such an honor to have you grace us here today. He's been in India for days in meetings. He flew in on Tuesday. He's lecturing at the House of Lords on Monday. He lectured today at Clifford Chance. Yesterday, HSBC. Then the day before, EY. Tomorrow he has Accenture. Then he's going to Bond Street to lecture in a boutique. Thank you so much for being amongst us here. It means so much to us. Thank you very much. And our final panelist, which is by no way the least, a very good friend of mine, someone who I believe is an example. Anyone who's a lawyer knows of him. In fact, I went to his competitor today and I said, I'm meeting this particular person. Yeah, yes, we know him. We know him. We all know him. This person, in my view, represents the height of success in the current generation. All of the various things that our ancestors and our past have given us to make way for a successful and ethical culture and a career, this person represents. I'm going to start off today's questions with him, and therefore I won't get in too much detail. But this person, out of many, many, in fact, he was also named Hot Lawyer of the Year Award in 2016. I don't know exactly what that means, but I can definitely tell you.
No, but they do. They do. Which I totally agree.
Last year, the Financial Times named him the Innovative Lawyer of 2015. Please put your hands together for Mr. Ranajoy Basu. Thank you. Okay, we're going to begin now. Thank you. So, Ranajoy, thank you for being with us. So my first question to you. Ranajoy is a partner at Reed Smith. And only about a week or so ago, a fortnight ago, Ranajoy was named the co-chairman of the entire India operations globally. Ranajoy, in your words, what does success mean?
Firstly, thank you for that introduction. Thank you everyone for being here. It's fantastic to see all of you here, and of course to Mr. Agarwal and his family for being such gracious hosts and having us here today. I will try and not get too excited in case I go through into the swimming pool, but I've been told that's where we're all sitting on. But before I quickly dive into his question, and thank you Surinder for that question as well, I must say this, that when Surinder asked me to come and speak for this, at this event, I was very excited because I would get to meet every one of you, but I did think to myself that, does this sound like the beginning of a bad joke? Like, there is a holy man, there is a wise man, and there is a lawyer. There's a holy man, there's a wise man, and there's a lawyer. You see where I'm going with this? And I asked him this evening, I said, when you were thinking about success and ethics, and a very interesting topic, where were you going with it? And he said, we wanted to capture, and he literally did this, both sides of the spectrum. So be that as it may. So let's see if I can speak to the first question, which is how, and success is quite a relative term. I think we all have each of our own meaning and definition of success. And if you ask most greedy corporate lawyers, businessmen, you expect that the conventional answer would be to make money. That's only a result. And that's not the aim of success. Success can never be sort of quantified in the amount of money you make. I think for me, and this is it's my personal view of what success means to me, and I'd be very, very interested to hear from my fellow panelists this evening, because I'll be taking serious notes. I've got lots to learn. But for me, success is about having found a purpose, to be able to have an impact. And there are various ways you can achieve that. But if you've got you've got a burning feeling in your belly, and it's not from the Indian food you ate the night before, then you know that you're onto something. And if you can deliver on that, and if you can pursue that, because look, if you, in anything that you have to do, particularly if you are in a financial lawyer like I am, it's not going to be easy all the time. It's like in any other profession. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be things that will make you feel challenged, will make you feel pushed, will make you feel that, why am I doing this? Now, if you're not passionate about it, if you don't feel extremely strongly about it, to be able to deliver what you are doing, I think it's very, very difficult to define success. So no amount of money actually can help you achieve that. So hence, profit is not a bad thing in the corporate world, but it's got to be something higher than that. So for me, success is about delivering a certain impact. And I can talk to that in further detail later, because I'd much rather hear from the other panelists at the moment. And the way you achieve that, it's being a part of the journey, as Surinder mentioned in his opening comments. It's about having, and with most people that you come across who are driven, who are looking to achieve something, you'll find that the idea of what that success is as well changes from time to time. Whether, if you're in school, if you're trying to achieve something, I'm looking at my two friends over there at that table, it could be something. Success could be sport. Success could be something creative. At the moment, with a 6-month-old baby, success for me is keeping him asleep. So, but in professional terms, and I think just kicking off with these thoughts, it's about being able to drive and pursue a certain passion of yours, and being able to achieve it and work on it, and also be able to inspire other people, because you can't achieve success on your own. People say it's very lonely on the top and everything, but you find that if you've, along the way, along that journey, if you've been able to inspire even one more person to believe in that vision of what you're trying to achieve. My mentors, for example, I've always worked in a way so I can not just emulate their success, but also see and learn things from what they are doing to be able to translate, to see if I can deliver on that in my success.
Thank you.
So
Thank
having
you.
purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll turn my attention now to Zed. Now, I don't normally have to do this because my wife is an Ayurvedic doctor and she feeds me Brahmi, which gives me good memory power, in case you're wondering how this guy remembers all of his verses and his stats. But I have to do this because this person's track record is phenomenal. We're talking about somebody who started a banking career in 1967. I was definitely probably in my third life previous. 1999, Chief Executive Officer of HSBC India. The first ever Indian to hold that position and be on that level in the entire group's operations. Didn't stop there. 2002, appointed GGM, Group General Manager. Moved to Malaysia to be the Deputy Chairman and the CEO. 2009, led the intercontinental business across European countries, totaling 19 for the commercial bank and also the retail bank. Didn't stop there. He was in fact the first Asian to hold that position. 44 years with HSBC, retiring in 2011. And for those who do know Zed, cricket's his passion. He's now in his second innings, and he's still a non-executive board member of HSBC's private bank, and along with many other corporations such as Tata. In fact, he was just in Singapore participating in the Tata board meetings over there.
I promise you, I've never heard anything about the story going on.
Said, how did you do it at that time where India had just gained independence and there was still so much turmoil? What did you have to go through at that time without any of your people around to achieve such statuses?
I don't know what to say to all that. It all sounds very grand, right? But, really, a career in banking and things like that, I'm not saying it's just another job, right? It's what you do with it. And I think coming back to your point when you talk about success, right? For me, success really meant and continues to mean, right? The fact that if you succeed, right, you inspire other people to succeed. And for me, that has been a very important aspect of my drive for whatever I did, because I came from a background, right, where in those years, in my organization, right, as an Indian, you were where you were, right? It was very difficult to break out into sort of the international scene because that's not how the group worked. Now, I know there are a lot of my colleagues over here, right? But so I've got to be a little careful about what I say. But at the end of the day, it really was very difficult because you were pigeonholed into a particular kind of place, as well as they had certain ideas about you. But that is what we should all continue to strive for. How do you break out of these kind of constraints, which are artificial constraints in my view? But you can try to break out, and some people try to break out very aggressively. That, I think, succeeds in nothing. In fact, it succeeds in alienation at the end of the day. What you've got to do is that you've got to be an example, right, of what is the right thing that you should be doing. And the right thing which you should be doing is not a very complicated thing. Everybody actually knows, right, what they're doing is right or wrong. If anybody turns around and tells me, oh, I've got to think about it, is this right, is this wrong, right, I think he's bluffing himself, because this is actually an inner thing. For me, it was very important to be able to demonstrate, right, that we as Indians, right, okay, were as good, if not better, right? But it's no use of sort of, going on and on about it. You've got to prove it by your actions. You've got to prove it by what you deliver, what you do in life, right? And so for me, it was, achieving things at the back of my mind was always the thought that if I achieve things in the right way, right, my colleagues, my other Indian colleagues, my other Asian colleagues, right, will have a better time. They will have an easier time, right, to get on with their lives. Because it's a very frustrating thing if you feel that you are in institutions, and it's not just HSBC in those days, it was many, that, you're just going to be bound by this thing, right? That really sort of limits your thinking, it limits your life, right? And it gets people very frustrated, right? So my feeling always was that if I did well, right, and did it in the right way, right, I think it would have a very beneficial effect, right, on other people who were aspiring in the same thing. And I'm very happy to say that today, I would say without any doubt, that of all the non-British executives in HSBC, I think singularly the most talented and the most successful, right, have been Indian executives.
What about that? Isn't that such
right?
What a statement, huh? What a statement.
And I can tell you that it was not easy, right, to get that sort of feeling through the system. But there were lots of us, right, who started in those days, who worked in that way. And for me, that is one measure of success. That am I seeing that the example which people set, did it have a beneficial effect for others in the long run?
Thank you so much, Sid. So two words which very nicely lead on to my first question to His Holiness: action and inner voice. Have you noticed that both of our corporate representatives here have spoken about their successes to help others? So my question to His Holiness: courage, I think, is something which I lack a lot of. I think to have the courage to do things differently. I'm a HSBC man. Okay? One of our values is to be courageous. To have the courage at that time where, forgive me and please don't be offended, where us Indians are just striving for material success. And you were also studying. So you weren't a dropout, you weren't not going to be successful. You had the courage to do something different. What did that inner voice sound like?
Good that you put the question in that way. I was wondering, if you asked me about success, it would have been very difficult to answer, sitting between two extremely successful individuals. And yeah, to achieve something, you do need courage. You need the drive. And from my personal perspective, I would say that real courage comes when you know there is someone extremely powerful behind you and he is giving you the support. And that way the ultimate consideration of that support comes from relying upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When you know that the one who is the Supreme Creator, one who is the Supreme Controller, the one who is the Supreme Maintainer, is behind you because you have taken shelter of Him, then you can afford to be absolutely fearless because you know that He is there and He will be there with you all the time.
And just to finish off on my first point, but what made you, why did you make that change? Why did you not follow the way, this is just my personal, the way India was going towards Western culture? I mean, if we look at the way I am dressed, for example, I'm not in my dhoti. I do wear a dhoti, by the way. I do have silk dhotis and colourful dhotis, but I'm not wearing one now. Why did you decide that I'm not going to follow the way British Raja just finished? Everybody now, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but in places where I visit, people are quite embarrassed to speak Hindi. You speak English if you're posh. You speak English if you're upper class in India. So what made you go back to your cultural roots and say, I'm going to create the spiritual revolution? Why did you do that?
Well, when we were growing up in India, we grew up with the understanding that West is the best. Therefore, we did look up to the West. And when I came to the West, then eventually I began to appreciate my original culture. It especially started when some of my American friends and German friends, not so much the Germans, but the Americans, had a very gross misconception that India is a poverty-stricken country. And I used to vehemently protest. That's often led to quite bitter arguments. But at the same time, I also became aware that while I'm defending my country, my culture, so little I knew about it. And that's the time I started to delve into the Vedic culture, or started off with Indian culture. I got some books from India and started to read them. And as I started to read them, I started to recognize the value of those wisdom. And then finally I decided to go back to India and pursue that life. So yeah, I went back to India, and so it was just as Mr. Koma was saying, that it was a spontaneous need from within that kind of drives you. Like the real motivation actually comes from there. Like you become convinced about something and you want to follow that and achieve that. And at that time, actually, I was feeling that I was a total misfit. I couldn't fit into the material nature, materialistic way of life. And I couldn't also enter into my spiritual life because I knew that I needed a guide to lead me into that path. And after an extensive search, rather quite accidentally, I came across my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. And that's how my life actually began. My journey actually began. And that's where I am today.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you very much. So, Ranajoy, partner at Reed Smith.
I'm sorry.
So glad somebody had to do it. It's one of us. Your values. So, you can kill me later on, but Ranajoy wakes up 4 a.m. every Saturdays to string his sitar. And I believe he has his Guruji in India on Skype.
Yes.
He bought him the laptop, he gave him a Wi-Fi connection, he showed him how to press on and off. Ranajoy, he's very cultural, he's very, 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 very much ethical, and he loves
The word he's looking for is strange.
He's a fanatic. Ranajoy, to get to a partner, it's not easy. It's not easy for any of us. And I don't hardly know. If I was to ask how many partners it's not many. Did you ever have to compromise your cultural, in fact, I can say, rich Bangala values to get to where you are?
No. No, I won't stop at that. But
do you drink?
yes. I'm sorry. We can see a trend developing here. But I think the question of value is an important one, actually, for everyone, especially, how do we align the two? Where do we align the two? Where do we think about aligning the two? When is it ethical? What in terms of what we're doing? So for me, it boils down to the same two things. That big burning sensation in the belly to say, I've got to get up and I've got to do this, and it translates to whether whether it translates to what I do at work, or if I really want to do something. And I'm sure that is the same for a lot of people, if not everyone in this room. That when you really want to get up and do it, there's nothing which stops you, and it becomes obsessive. It becomes obsessive. And you find a way, whether it's getting up at 4 a.m. and stringing your sitar to learn from someone who is thousands of miles away because you want to do it, or whether you want to stay till 4 a.m. and close a transaction for a client. You want to do it. You've got to be passionate about it. But I think the value proposition is an important one, because I think at the heart of it all, it's a really noisy world out there, actually. It's really complicated. We talk about innovation, we talk about sustainability, we talk about delivering impact. But I think one of the main ways, I found it the easiest way of delivering on that is actually being able to remain yourself and do it in your way, in the way you would do anything else. It's how you would approach anything, family, work, your work ethic, they call it, your family ethics, your ethics towards keeping commitments. And that doesn't change. I mean, if I just take 30 seconds to translate that into sort of a corporate example, if you look at the biggest and the best brands, the corporate brands that people basically rise towards, that identify themselves with, you'll see it's always at the end of the day about a certain value. Take Nike, for example. They are a commodity. They manufacture shoes. But when you think of Nike, you don't think of their air soles or their rubber soles, which are better than Reebok. You don't think of that. If you see their ads, they're about honoring the world's best athletes and honoring athletics. That's what they're about. That's the soul of the company. And that's what I don't think, I sit there on a Friday evening thinking, am I ethical? Or, would I have done this differently? Would I have done this differently? Yes. There comes the question of innovation. But in terms of value, I think irrespective of what any of us should be or would be doing in our environment, we wouldn't be doing it differently had we not known who we are, I think.
Thank you, Ranajoy. So it does seem like And it's good we started on this point because nowadays cultures and the diversity of cultures is something which is everywhere. Just on my floor, in fact, it's not a very busy floor now, but people speak their own languages, they conduct conversations, meetings in their native languages, whether it's on the phone, whether it's in meeting rooms. So there is a much more acceptance nowadays. But let's move on to a time where there wasn't so much of an acceptance of diversity. Said, your journey is a phenomenal journey. I don't think there are people here that can put their hand up and say, yeah, we know someone who's had a career for that long and a successful, pioneering career that's inspired the lives of many people globally.
I know some, don't worry. I'm not unique.
I'm sure they're connected to him. But my question, Zed, to you is, at that time, you spoke of not retaliating in an aggressive way. Did you ever face situations wherein the common person would retaliate in an aggressive way, such as, for example, racism?
Well, it's very important, it's very interesting, that you bring up this word of racism, because I always felt very strongly, right, having come here as a young trainee in 1967 or 68, clearly I interacted with, the sort of young elite who had been brought in from public schools over here as trainees, because that's what Hong Kong Bank did in those days. And then, of course, after 2 years of being over here, everybody was sent out east. Now, they were sent out east, right, to Hong Kong or to Singapore or to X or to Y. We, right, Indians who came here, or Malaysians who came here, or Singaporeans who came here, right, for this training, they were sent back to their home country, right? And I can still remember when I came over here, right? This is meant to be a funny story, but when I came over here, I was interviewed by BBC, right, live. And there was this rather sort of supercilious BBC presenter who asked me very pompously, well, Mr. Kama, why have you been sent over here? So I thought this guy's a real, sorry for the word, fuckwit. You know what I mean?
The technical term.
Yes. So
it was an adult here, so it's fine.
So I turned around and said, actually, I was sent here to learn how to eat with a fork and a knife. And there was absolutely deadly silence because this guy knew that he had said the wrong thing to somebody over there. But anyway, the interview continued. But I felt very strongly from those days that how come these others were sent out, right, as international managers and they moved around, but we, right, who I certainly felt were as good, if not better, right, were just sent back and our career was going to be in one place, in one country. Right? So, with that in mind, I was always somebody, along with a few others, right, who pushed very hard, right, that we should also be international. Why should not we be international? We were Indian, yes, but that made no difference. And of course, if you keep pushing against a door, eventually it will start opening. And the good thing was that we had, right, at a particular point of time, we had a gentleman who was our group chairman, who, in my view, was the greatest group chairman HSBC has ever had. His name is Willie Purvis, right? And he's still alive. He's 85 years old, and he's a very good friend. And he knew that I was always pushing. Now, he liked me because I was quite pushy, right? In that respect, in many respects. And one day, I was with him in Hong Kong, right? And this is a true story. And he knew why I was, sort of wanting to meet him, which was to push this thing that why aren't I also an international executive? And he finally got very fed up. And then he turned around and said to me, right, he said, are you suggesting that we are racist? And I turned around and told him, you're absolutely racist, right? So he turned around and said to me, I won't use those words again. He said, now get out of my office and go do your work. 2 weeks later, right, got a letter saying you've been made an international executive. 2 Indians were the first 2 who were made international executives. And today, of course, right, the international executive scheme, as my colleagues over here know, is open to everybody. but we opened that door. And you did it not just by pushing, you did it also by working hard, by working honestly, right? And by having the corporation's interests primarily there, your interests secondary. And that is what I would always tell people who are working with corporations. The corporation's interests, right, must be kept in mind. It's not just you, because otherwise what will happen is people will think that this guy's all for himself. Because when you rise up in an organization, your first responsibility is to your people, right? And if as a manager, right, you cannot look after your people in every which way, then I think you're a failure. And that all you're interested in is yourself. And if that's the case, in my lexicon, you're a failure. So please think about that, when you'll rise, when you'll have responsibility, when you'll have people who work with and for you, right? That they are very important. Your success is built on their success. And if you don't show that, right, you will not get the kind of support which everybody needs. No man is an island in that.
I think that's a really strong message in there as well. And you mentioned the point of leadership and how that ties in. And to your point, when you're working with a group of driven, talented people who are wanting to achieve as well, you don't have to really micromanage them.
No.
As a leader, if you give them the vision and they can believe in the vision of where you all are sailing in the same direction to achieve in the same thing, that commonality, once you have that commonality, the best thing about the team, the group, is that you brought people together. And that's when you really achieve a lot. And that is, going back to your first question, one of the biggest attributes of success. Yeah.
Success by being selfless. I mean, those two words don't come to one's mind. That's a phenomenal concept, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? To be successful by being selfless. I mean, that's, in my words, corporate love. Isn't it really? It actually exists. Thank you, Zed, for sharing that.
I'll just give... sorry, I'm taking...
Please.
I'll give an example, which is what I learned. And I think I learned that from my father. My father was in the army, right? And he was a very good soldier, right? I would say that even though he was my father, he was a very good soldier. But the one thing that he had, which I saw, was he had great leadership skills. And the leadership skills came out of the fact that they knew this man, right, was working for them, right? And that their interests would be totally at heart. And I saw this as a child, that when we were in a place called Fatehgarh, which is in UP, my father was commanding that area, right? And every morning, I found, there used to be about 6 soldiers who would come in the morning, and they would sit over there and want to see his face. They just want to see his face, and then they would go back to their job. And what that gave for me, what that showed me was, right, that is a quality of leadership which comes from something which people see in you internally, and which comes out in your actions and in the way you conduct your life.
Thank you, Zed.
Sorry for the long...
No, absolutely. Thank you, Zed, for that, and Anjali for participating. Your Holiness, words like selfless, words such as doing things for others, these are all very much spiritual words. His Holiness spoke about success. I mean, there really aren't many saints who are as successful as Bhakti Chara Swami. There are tens, hundreds, and thousands of people who His Holiness leads. A huge number of them have their businesses internationally. A huge number of them are partners, are executives of so many corporations. Your Holiness, when you meet such people and you see that they genuinely spend most of their working hours working for a corporation, what is your message to them about how they can still cultivate their spiritual development? What is your message to them? How do they keep cultivating their spiritual consciousness?
So, in order to answer that question, I'll first try to define what is material and what is spiritual. that is centered around your body, that is material. When your body is the center, and anything related to that is material. And that is centered around God, that is spiritual. And irrespective of what one is doing, if he does it with that awareness of that personality, who is the supreme proprietor, supreme controller, and in that sense, he is our supreme father. He is our most benevolent well-wisher. And he is so concerned about our welfare that he is situated in everyone's heart. Just as the loving father follows the child wherever he goes, he is following us wherever we are going. And then we begin to see that everything is actually his creation. And different individuals are situated in different situations. Then what they need to do is just offer their best. And this honest commitment to one's responsibility is the most important guiding factor in our lives. And so, we do not tell people or those who are following us that give up your life, give up what you're doing. We are saying, no, don't do that. Rather, do it in the best possible way, recognizing that through your service, you are serving Him. Those who are around you, they are your brothers and sisters with a common Father. And try to take care of them in the most earnest way. And if one is motivated to do that, then he becomes happy and content. And those who are around him also benefit from that. And they also become joyful in wherever they are situated. It is very important, you see, to create that awareness that God is there. And He, although we are not able to see Him, but He is seeing us. And He wants us to become related to Him. Although we have forgotten Him, but He hasn't forgotten us. So when we develop that awareness, then automatically the quality of our performance changes, quality of our life changes. And this awareness actually creates the proper, peaceful, and prosperous environment all over the world.
Thank you, Your Holiness, for sharing that insight. Manoj,
I told you I'd be
see
taking
you're
notes.
making notes.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you went to bless my fellow colleagues in other law firms.
Anybody have a different chance? Do you feel blessed? Thank you. Manoj, on your path to becoming a partner, and congratulations, of course, on being co-chair for India's global operations, wherever there is Indian clientele. One of the fears that most of us have are our commitments to our family, wife, children. Is this something which you've had to compromise? So, for example, do you see your kids and your wife as often as you used to? And does that worry you?
Okay, this is a really hard one actually, because
So sorry.
no, I knew he'd leave the difficult question for me. It's a hard one because we talk about work-life balance. I really don't think there's any balance as such. It's the decisions you make. If you decide to be at work with your colleagues and you're working, you're working. If you're not, you're not there with your family. And if you decide that at the same time you'd rather be with your family, or if you are with your family, you decide to be with your family. So it's the decisions you make. Do I decide to be at work in this situation in my life because I need to, I want to, I'm committed to, going back to your point on commitment, it is my responsibility. Then you ask yourself, is there a balance in responsibility? Can you balance the responsibility? Do I want to spend more time with my family? Absolutely. Do I think that I spend enough? I don't think I'll ever think I spend enough time with my family. Am I worried? No, I'm not worried because, in my case, although we don't have family here, most of my family, in fact, all of my family are in India. But I do know that even though I'm stuck at work late in the odd hours of the morning, I know that my wife is taking care of my two kids. That it gives me some sort of solace that we are bringing those two up. But in terms of, do we compromise? I think it's a decision that we make for whatever reasons, for stability, for sustainability, for career development, for success, for progress, for responsibilities that we have, not just to ourselves as our family, but responsibilities that we all have towards our team. I know, and some of my colleagues are here as well, they know that if I'm sitting at home with my family, they're probably sitting in the office away from their family. And it would be slightly insensitive, I think, for me at that point to sort of say, you know what, I'm just going to do my own thing. Because you realize that when it's a common success that we're all achieving for, so it's not fair, I think, that to gain on one side, you sort of completely disregard the other. So it is a balancing act in a way. I don't think there is a work-life balance. You've got to make your decisions, and you've got to stick to those decisions. So if I know that it's my son's birthday, or if I know that I have to take my kids out, or if I have to spend time with my whole family together, it's my decision to do so. And I think clients, people you work with, if they value you as an ethical, principled person, they know you are committed to being there for them when they need you the most. They will also, in my experience, I find, they value when you tell them, I can do this call tomorrow morning first thing, but this evening I can't take any calls because I've got to be with my family for whatever reason. So I think you've got to be communicative of what's important. But to say that, I've never really got the work-life balance yet, it only translates, when I hear that a lot. Because a lot of people in the city, and I'm sure you know as well, they do complain of that a lot. It's not just true for the legal profession or the financial world. But I think it's a question of then telling them that you've got to prioritize those decisions to make sure that not only you're spending time with them, but you're doing what is most valuable to you, is how I'd put it.
Thank you, Manager. Mrs. Basu is online, so we'll be asking her a few moments later.
Okay, this changes everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Manager. Thank you. Zed, there's a common question which I think probably all of you have been asked when you're interviewed for any job. That common question tends to be, tell me a challenge and how you overcame it. But Zed, I want to change that question to you a little bit. I would like you to please share with us an experience throughout your journey where you had a challenge and you were not able to fix it. You had a challenge and you were not able to accomplish it. You failed in that challenge. Do you have an example like that? And what did you learn from that failure?
This sounds terrible that I can't think of anything.
What did you learn from failure?
It's really terrible. I guess I was quite a determined kind of guy. You know what I mean? So I looked at challenges as something to be overcome. You know what I mean? Because if a wall is put over there. Your job is to be able to see what's on the other side. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to back off a little from that question, but more to...
Yeah, you can look at me. I've failed in lots.
No.
In fact, my success is through all my failures, actually. So.
Is to say that, when we talk about this work-life balance, because I think that that's a challenge, right? And it's a moot point. So I take back a little bit of what I said earlier. It's a moot point as to whether one succeeded or not, or success. I think for me a big challenge was the fact that once you sort of start moving around all over the world, right, you take your family with you. And often that's a challenge in that, when you have young and growing kids, right, they get very attached to certain places, their friends, etc. And then, of course, you uproot them, right, to say that, and especially in HSBC, you're literally, in those days you used to be told you're going 1 week from now and your family can follow later, kind of thing. But in my case, I guess the biggest challenge that really came up, and I still think about it as to whether I handled it properly or not, right, is that when I was here in London in the 90s, I came from Hong Kong when we bought the Midland Bank, right? And then I was told in 1998 that they wanted me to go back to India, right? And go back as, essentially going back as chief executive, right? So that was sort of almost like the apex of your career, right? But at that point, my kids were at the age where they were rather embedded in the school system here. And so my wife was not at all keen, right, to go back to India because it was going to be 5 years away. So there was this challenge, your marriage, your relationship, which is a very real thing because, sometimes you can divorce yourself from your work, but you can't quite divorce yourself from your family, right, in that way because mentally you're very attached, right? But I guess I took the decision, right, that I said I'm going, right, because I guess my wife was perhaps sort of hoping that I wouldn't, right? But having come this long in the journey from what I had been, what I wanted to be, to see the sort of golden chalice up there and give it up at that point of time, right, was just in my kind of personality. It was not acceptable. So I just said, I'm going, right? And you all don't have to follow, and they didn't want to because of school, etc. So for 5 years I was alone, right? My family was here, I was over there. It didn't mean, we went backwards and forwards, right? You know what I mean? But you can't go backwards and forwards when you're running something all the time, right? So that was a challenge, right? And our marriage survived, right? We've got a very good relationship. Despite the odd bits and sods now and then, like everybody, right? And we've got the most wonderful relationship I have with my children, right? Who, in fact, encouraged their father to say that, Dad, don't sort of miss out. So I had that very strong feeling of support. But, you often think about these things, right? That was a challenge, right? And did you do the right thing, right, at that point of time? I guess the fact that everything is okay, shows I made a choice which worked out well for me. Maybe, it was somebody else who was helping me at that point of time, right? If it hadn't, right, would I have said that I had been successful? My success or otherwise would have been very muted. You would have always felt for the rest of your life that whilst you were achieving what you wanted, it was at the cost of something which was so precious, which you were losing. And once it's lost, right? So I'm putting your question in a different way, right, to show about challenges, right, and success or not.
Thank you.
You use the word compromise as well. I'd like to add that, just as we think twice about compromising for ourselves, I think it's really also important to make sure that your better half or your partner or your wife or your dear ones, that they don't end up compromising their achievements, their objectives, because you're on your path to success. I mean, to give you an example, my wife used to be in a bank as well, like you, and she was actually closing a big transaction, and we knew that. I mean, I had one son during that time, And I knew that, one of us would either have to stay back, and it wasn't going to be her. But we both had really important days. So I said, you do your thing because you have to do it. And I took and he was 4.5 at the time. I just took him to work. And most partners said, it's great that you've done it, because no one even, and I didn't even think twice about saying, I'm taking a 4-year-old child to spend the whole day with me, because even the fact that I was very busy. I just did it as second nature by thinking, you know what, he's not going to stay home alone, obviously. She's got to do her thing. We've got to do our thing, but he'll come with me to work. And we did it. And it was fascinating, because people looked at that, the people drew from that. And ever since, we've had numerous occasions where people, if they don't have help or they've got to bring their kids in, they bring their kids in. So it helped in bringing a bit of change as well, which is great.
Thank you.
It's enormous. Yeah.
And Zed, especially thank you for that, because apparently my wife's over here and I need to be an international manager, so if you don't join me in a few years, I'm going to follow my mentor and spend 5 years away from you. So please remember that. Zed, it really means a lot to me, because I'm about to make that move very soon.
So
thank you.
She's not objecting though.
Yeah. She's smiling.
I would like to move the attention now. We've discussed so much about heightened material success. I want to now just move our attention more to some of the more philosophical, more spiritual traditions. And therefore, Your Holiness, I would like to just request you to now share with us some core principles, for example, the Bhagavad Gita. I think it is a very, very difficult task to be a custodian of such ancient wisdom. And what strikes me, Your Holiness, is whenever I or any of us delve into these literatures, what we find is that whether it's the Lord or whether it's the saints, they're always revealing the truth, wisdom, spirituality to, in fact, those who are very much part of the world. We look at Krishna Arjuna, we look at Krishna Yudhishthira, we look at saints and kings, for example, Janaka, and we look at Vishwamitra. Now we're celebrating Diwali. In fact, we always find that the recipients are people like us, people who are of the world. And you are a custodian of that wisdom. What is your message in that spirit, what is your message to people who are trying to develop economically? What is the message to people who are trying to develop artha, wealth, kam, moksha? How would you direct us so that we can think about and be conscious of some very essential principles of spiritual life while we conduct our daily work?
Well, since you brought up this topic of Bhagavad Gita, let us define that Bhagavad Gita is the essence of the entire Vedic wisdom. The word Vedas means knowledge. So, the knowledge about, not only about this material nature, but the knowledge about the spiritual reality. That is what the Vedas are dealing with. And the Vedas have 3 sections. The Karmakanda section, then Jnanakanda section, and devotion or surrender to the Lord. These are the 3 gradual developments. Bhagavad Gita deals with all 3 in a very, very profound and sublime way. So, the Bhagavad Gita is giving us the direction that how to be happy or how to fulfill our existence in a proper way. The first aspect is Karmakanda. Karmakanda section is dealing with how to enjoy properly in this material nature. And that is leading to the understanding of action-reaction principle. In simple words, as you sow, so shall you reap. And there are higher authorities who are actually watching our actions, and accordingly they are subjecting us to the reactions. Therefore, be careful how you act. While right action will lead you to happiness, wrong actions will lead you to punishment or suffering. So, everyone wants to be happy, and the way to become happy is by fulfilling your desires. When our desires are fulfilled, we are happy, we feel happy. So Vedas are giving directions through the Karmakanda section how to fulfill your desires. You want to accumulate a lot of wealth? Yes, do this and you will get wealth. You want to become a king? Do this and you'll become a king. And it goes on like that. So Vedas through this Karmakanda sections are giving us directions how to really enjoy. For example, like one may think that if I get a lot of money, then I'll enjoy. And he robs the bank. He gets the money. But instead of enjoying the money, he ends up in the prison. So you see like how wrong actions, although it may lead you to achieving your goal, but it will end up causing distress for you. So anyway, so this is how the Vedas are giving the direction, how to enjoy by fulfilling your desires. Now, in spite of fulfilling all one's desires, one eventually realizes that in spite of all my endeavors to enjoy, I am ending up suffering. Why am I suffering? So this point, why am I suffering, is leading to the next branch of the Vedas, known as Gyanakanda section. So Gyanakanda section gives a very, very extensive understanding, the nature of this material nature, and our situation in the material nature, and what is the conclusion? The conclusion is this material nature is a place of suffering. And this body is a wonderful instrument to receive pain. Like, see how precisely they are analyzing this. Consider, take any part of your body and consider in how many ways you can inflict pain to that part of the body. Just take an insignificant part of your body like, thank you. Thank you. An insignificant part of your body like your earlobes. Consider in how many ways you can inflict pain to your earlobes. And now you consider in how many ways you can give pleasure to your earlobes. Now that principle actually applies to every single part of our body. So what is the conclusion? This body is meant for receiving pain. But still we are trying to enjoy through the body in a place which is actually meant for suffering. So when you realize that, then what is your natural reaction to that? Let's get out of here as soon as possible. Why should I remain in a situation that is going to cause me distress? So let me get out. Like a prisoner in the prison, what's his motive? What's the intense desire? Still, how to get out of the prison. So that is leading to the state of liberation or getting out of this material nature. So Karmakanda section is leading how to enjoy in this material nature. Jnanakanda section is leading to how to get out of the material nature or how to achieve liberation. And that course is leading very systematically to the point of recognizing our actual identity being spiritual and the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Existence of identity of God or recognizing God. Like I'll briefly try to explain that. This branch of philosophy in the Vedas called the Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya literally means analytical study. The analytical study kind of analyzes the material, our perceivable reality. This nature, this world is made of 5 elements. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. That is solid substance, liquid substance, fiery substance, aerial substance, and ethereal substance. These are the 5 elements with which this material nature is made of. Now we have 5 senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and touch. The interaction between the 5 senses with the 5 elements gives rise to 5 objects of the senses. Like ears interacts with, okay, can you please, thank you. Yeah. So the ear interacts with ether, sound is produced. Skin interacts with air, touch is produced. Eyes interact with fire, foam is produced. Tongue interacts with water, taste is produced. And nose interacts with earth, and smell is produced. So this is how 5 elements interacting, or rather 5 senses interacting with 5 elements gives rise to the 5 objects of the senses. And then there are 5 working senses with which we become active. And they are speech, hands, belly, genital, and anus. So 20. 5 fours are 20. Then they consider that there are 3 subtle elements: mind, intelligence, and false ego. Man, buddhi, and ahankar. 23. Then the sum total of the ingredients of the creation called Mahat Tattva, the basic ingredients from which this nature has been composed of or manifested. So 24. So in this way, with this 24 consideration, they analyze the entire material nature, entire material creation. But then they considered that these 24 considerations are objective in nature. But the objects cannot exist without the subject. So who is the subject? The subject is I. I am, therefore this is. Now the entire material nature has been analyzed through this 24 analysis, but I couldn't be found there. Therefore, I is beyond matter. I am not a product of matter, but I am non-material, and I am spiritual, and that I is, in Sanskrit, is known as Atma, or in English, soul. So see how systematically they transcend the material nature and come to the spiritual reality. So the 25th consideration is the soul. which is spiritual. But then the consideration is that the souls are many and minute. You have your soul, he has his soul, I have my soul. All of us have our individual souls. Therefore, that must have an origin. So the origin of all souls is the supreme soul, and that is God. So in this way, it is coming to that, and that automatically leads to we, being the parts and parcels of the Lord, must have a relationship with Him. So how to re-establish that relationship? And that becomes the goal of life. And eventually when one surrenders to Him, then the Lord picks him up in his loving embrace, and he becomes situated in his spiritual identity.
Thank you, Swamiji, for so beautifully outlining the entire material, aggregate matter.
So that's why the end consideration of Bhagavad Gita is, it's a Sanskrit verse I'll recite, Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam braja aham tvang sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma suchaha. That is, don't worry about all your responsibilities and duties and so forth. Just surrender unto me, and I will take care of you. I'll deliver you from all your suffering condition. Don't worry about it. So see, the best way to become free from our suffering condition in this material nature is simply to surrender unto Him. And when He takes care of us, then there is nothing to worry about.
Thank you so much, Swamiji, for such a beautiful response. I think that's given us so much food to think about, and how we can relate the reality around us and connect it to something beyond, which actually lies within each and every one of us, the Atma. Thank you, Your Holiness. Before we break for Q&A, so have your questions ready. We're going to just finish off in a few more moments. Manajre, in the spirit of just moving on, there's a beautiful verse which is in the Vedas. Shatahasta samhara, you should earn with hundreds of hands. Sahasrahasta sankira, but you should give away with thousands. One of your initiatives is the A World at School. Tell us a little bit about this initiative that actually got you an award for educating girls in India. How do you give back to society? And I think one difference between yourself and maybe some people over here is you were also born in India as well.
I was. Yeah.
How did you give back to society through your endeavors and initiatives?
I think Swamiji just answered that. Actually, it's through what we do really. And if I had to ask myself that what is the easiest way for me to be involved, to be able to create an impact, to be significant, to be able to play my part, I can't come up with too many answers, to be honest. But what I have been trained for, what I've spent a lot of my time, in fact, most part of my professional and training life, is to learn finance, to learn the law, and to be able to apply the two together. That's one of the very few things I'm trained to do. And I was very fortunate, actually. It was a very opportune moment, and this sort of goes back to whether you'd call it destiny or whether you'd call it, alignment of stars or whatever, or just pure luck. I'd just say I was just lucky that someone at that point in time was looking for a lawyer who wanted to combine the two skills of someone who understood finance, someone who understood structuring a transaction. But the project was very beautiful. It was basically, it sounds very simple, it's basically raising finance across the world for the education of children in one of the remotest parts of India. Need I say more? I think, every one of us here would put their hands up for something like that if it involved education of children. And I did. I did because I thought that it was, because of the legal aspect to it, it was something that I felt that I would be able to contribute to. So that is what the project was really. it was the first time that funding was able to be sort of brought together from various different parts of the world through various regulatory regimes, through various laws that one had to grapple with, and come up with a solution. And the solution, and this boils down to, I wish I could recite Sanskrit as well as you, Surinder.
Thank you. I don't place it down.
Swamiji. But basically, it boiled down to sort of the commonality that everyone was working towards, and the main objective on that transaction, and which is why we were so inspired to be a part of it, is because we wanted to make sure that whatever happened, there were two things actually. One was we wanted to make sure that the finance actually reaches that remotest part of India where the children are educated. That was the real impact. So we didn't see it as a finance transaction where if things go wrong, you could then step back and say, oh, you know what, we're going to walk away from this, because you can't, because you're dealing with the lives of very, very vulnerable children. And the second thing was, which was particularly interesting from my perspective as a lawyer, with my lawyer hat on, was that we wanted to bring up a structure which withstood the changes of regulation, of politics, of governments, so that whatever happened during the life of the transaction, what would not happen, and this was the critical part, you would not be able to pull the plug on the project. And 1 year on, it took us about a year and a half to actually put everything together, because there was funds from the US, there was funds from, it's called a development impact bond. And I think 1 year on, the results have shown that more than 30,000 people, 30,000 children have been educated through that transaction, which just to be a part of and say, I did my little bit to be able to help in that is success.
Absolutely.
I think that really deserves a round of applause, doesn't it, ladies and gentlemen? How amazing. That is so inspiring. Thank you, Anna Joy. Zed, my final question before we wrap up for Q&A. I mean, clearly, when somebody hears your values, your messages, your style, I mean, it's phenomenal. It really is. I mean, for those who are making notes, either mentally or on paper, you know, to be selfless, to be flexible, to be non-aggressive, to be compassionate, to be kind, to have integrity, all those things. These are very, very core spiritual, very, very core religious qualities that I have to admit that it's not always that every religious person can grasp, and not always that every non-religious person can grasp. Zed, it does look like... I
must ask my wife whether I have all these qualities or not.
I'm your mentee, so I know. Zed, my question really, and this is coming from, this is just my personal question is, your life contains, in my view, the hand of God. Please share with me, if what I'm saying is right, how you've seen the hand of God throughout your beautiful life.
Well, it's a very difficult one to answer. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? It's a very difficult one to answer just offhand, but sorry, just what was the last bit? Okay. Well, I may not look religious, right? But I am a little religious. I don't know whether you know, but I'm a Parsi, and Parsis are Zoroastrians, right? And I say my prayers every morning. It takes me about 2 minutes, right, to do that. But having said that, right, for me, our religion, right, is based around a very simple tenet. The very simple tenet is, right, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, right? That is the basic tenet of Zoroastrianism. And if you look at those three thoughts, good words, good deeds, and if you try to live your life on that, I think you have what you need, because one follows the other. You don't need other things to think about, because this is something which is your personal choice. You make the choice. Choices are for you. I don't think choices come from elsewhere. So you've got to be able to guide your life with some kind of thinking. And I look at it from that point of view. And coming back to, the fact of charity, I think that the one thing that I learned certainly from my parents was they always told me one thing. They told me, because we come from a country which has an enormous amount of problem in certain respects, right? They used to always tell me, and this stuck in my mind, they always said, remember, never forget the poor. Never forget the poor, right? And it came also to me because my great-great-grandfather, right, in Gujarat, in those years, he was when he was a boy of 11 at school, he came from a very middling background, and he was asked by his school teacher as to where the river Nile was. And he said, in South America. And the teacher slapped him in front of the whole class. He went home that day and he never went back to school. He then, from the next day, he started earning. And from the first day he started earning, he gave away 1/3 of whatever he earned in charity, right? And he was a very rich man because he was knighted, he was a sir, all this. He became the biggest railway contractor in Gujarat, right? And I take inspiration from that kind of thing when you talk about religion, when you talk about, praying, etc. The real practical thing in life, right, is to lead your life, right, in the right way and through example of other people. And for me, that has been my core thinking, right, in terms of being able to do things, right, for other people, especially, I would say, to all of you, in our country, because it is very much needed. And your initiative with children is just absolutely fabulous, because that is the most important thing anywhere in the world, and particularly in places like India. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you
I
so
hope
much.
that, yeah.
And now we open for questions. So please just raise your hand. Anybody from the front would like to ask a question? Yes, of course. How would you like to do it? Would you like to use my microphone? Yep, okay, I'll pass it around, no problem. It's a red one, so it's fine. Everybody will love it.
One.
Mine's really to the two. My questions are to the two gentlemen in the corporate sphere. Have your ethics ever been compromised? And you operate in professions where it's effectively a club, rightly or wrongly. And how does trust come into it with your fellow cohorts? How do you deal with when you're going through difficult times? And how do you deal with those sort of, when you're going through troubled waters, to salvage those times when your ethics are being tested?
Well, are you saying, I'm just trying to get my head around the question, how do you, in the kind of business we do, right, clearly there are times when things are put forward to you, which you, well, I think you know what is right and what is wrong, right, okay, and organizations also build their own culture, right, and one of the big things about HSBC has always been, right, that, we've been a very ethical organization. Now, I know people will stand up and say we've had a lot of problems as well. And yes, we have, right? And that's been where the culture, right, has broken down. Because I come back to the old thing of saying, you know what is right and you know what is wrong. So don't use excuses, right? By saying that, oh, well, it was put in this way and it was put in that way. And therefore, we did it and then found out later. You know right from the start. But I think if you start with that kind of thinking, right, you will find that people actually, once they interact with you, will not bring those kind of things to you. They will not put you into a position. I've never been put into a position where a client has come to me to say that, can you do this transaction, right, okay, and you know that there's something or the other over there which is wrong, right? They just don't come to you. Maybe they just see that in you because of the kind of person you are. And you've got to build that with yourselves as people. Within yourself, you've got to build that, right, to say that you know what's right, you know what's wrong, right, and live it in your job.
Thanks for handling the ethics question. I'm going to take on the trust one. So you mentioned ethics and trust. everything that we do, essentially, especially as a lawyer, I think, revolves around trust. Your clients need to trust you because you're representing them. Your colleagues need to trust you with the decisions that you're making. Otherwise, they say something in the legal profession, especially for transactional lawyers, that you're only as good as your last transaction. If your clients see that they can't trust you, they won't come to you again. And it can be a very slippery slope, especially in the environment that we operate, which is extremely competitive, but extremely. There are lots of good people out there. There are a lot of good firms who are doing, what you're doing. But your differentiating factor is how you do it. And ethics plays a very, very big part of how you do something. And in terms of trust, yes, it takes a long time to build that trust. I remember my days as a junior associate I used to sit there wondering, all these partners, when they get transaction, when HSBC calls them and says, we've got a deal for you, how do they do it? How is it ever going to happen? And it happens through trust over time.
It wasn't more client trust, it was more with your colleagues.
Yes.
Because as you know, many reputable law firms have failed recently because partners weren't congruent to the organisation's goals. And therefore, individual partners' ethics have been compromised, rightly or wrongly. That's where I was angling. Not
Absolutely,
client trust.
absolutely, and that's a very live issue. And afraid to say, hopefully we won't see, but there's no one can say that there won't be such failures, institutional failures going forward as well. I think communication plays a big part because, again, the environment that you're talking about, you're in an environment where, just like the HSBCs, just like the big banks, just like the big corporates, law firms today are also big corporate, very big institutions with thousands of people. And human beings by nature are very, very complicated. So the level of trust, the level of ethics, what they think, everyone in that institution is not going to be the same. But what should be the same, what cannot change as an institution, is the core value, what makes the institution what it is, what it stands for. Because once that is compromised, then you're losing a battle. And individually, you should be challenged. And I am challenged every day by the team I am in. Not because they don't trust me, but because sometimes the best answers comes through people who challenge you. They might have the right answer. It can only come through because they're challenging, they're pushing the borders of what you believe in, what you think a certain thing should be done, how a certain thing should be drafted, how you should say something. But the core principle, I think, is the bedrock, the foundation of the institution. And I think, to your point, where that trust amongst the colleagues, amongst partners, amongst senior management is compromised, the resultant, history has just shown that the institution then ultimately fails.
If I might say, the best example of trust, if you want to put it, I think, is in things like the defense services, right, where people actually trust their leader, their platoon commander or X or Y. They actually trust him with their lives. And that must be the ultimate trust, that they know, right, that they have to go and do something. This man is leading them, right, and he must have thought as to what is the best way to preserve ourselves in this very difficult circumstances. And that's the reason why they go with this person. And that's the reason why they may not go with somebody else. And that happens in the corporate world as well, that trust with the people who work for you. If they don't trust you, I can assure you, right, A, your area will not be successful, and B, ultimately you will not be successful as well.
Thank you for that question. Thank you. Anybody else over here with a question? Just over here. Thank you. I've seen your hand at the back. You can leave your hand down. Thank you.
This is a question for... can you hear?
Yeah.
Is that okay? This is a question for Maraj. I just wanted to ask you, in the world now, especially for us individuals who work in the city, we have material desires to be successful, to become a lawyer, to become a businessman, to become an entrepreneur, for example. But we also have a desire to become spiritually connected to God as well. So how in this day and age do you balance that to make sure that you're still fulfilling your material desire to become that next big leader, but at the same time making sure you don't lose that connection with God and you're still building that on a day-to-day basis?
I will go back to the basic definition I gave between material and spiritual. Things that are centered around you, meaning your body, is material. And things that are centered around God is spiritual. So to live in this material nature, we have to act. And the ideal situation would be the freedom to act according to one's propensity. Like, say, if somebody wants to study, teach, he should be given that opportunity. Somebody wants to be an administrator and warrior, he should have that opportunity. So that is the perfect society where everybody gets an opportunity to function according to his propensity. To what extent one is getting that opportunity is a different question. In today's world, I would say that motivation and propensity and, intensity of desire is not really the factor. Unfortunately, money has become the motivating factor. But again, like today's world has forgotten, as Ranjay actually pointed out at the beginning of his statement, that money is not the goal, money is the means. So yes, money is needed because money is the medium of exchange. But it is not the goal, it is the means. And with that understanding that when we function, when we act, and we recognize that we are living in the world that has been created by God and maintained by God, whatever we are getting is actually His gift to us. Often we forget, that how wonderful His gifts are coming to us in abundance without paying any price. How much price do we pay for a breath of oxygen? But that is the most vital factor for our survival. We are not paying any price for that. And also consider how beautifully He is maintaining everything. We are taking oxygen, giving out carbon dioxide. If the process continued, the whole atmosphere would have been filled with carbon dioxide. But the trees and plants are taking the carbon dioxide and giving us the oxygen back. Who made this arrangement? Now, if we simply become aware of His inconceivable mercy that is being constantly showered upon us, and we remain grateful to Him, then irrespective of what our occupation is, we can be spiritual. Our life can be spiritual because of His awareness. And along with that awareness comes gratitude and fearlessness.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Holiness. We had a question by Rumit in the back. Thank you.
First of all, thank you. It's been a great discussion, conversation. I think we've got a lot to think about. Question, I guess, principally for Swamiji. When we think about our own moral and ethical compass, how do you differentiate between spirituality and religion?
Wonderful, very nice question. religion actually is the science about the spiritual reality. Just as physics is the science of energy, chemistry is the science of matter, mathematics is the science of number. Science means a systematic process of understanding and mastering a subject and applying it in a practical way. So if we take that definition, then religion actually is the science about the spiritual reality. Beyond this material nature, another reality is there, which is actually the real reality. And religion is the science. Religion leads us to understand that reality. Now you consider every religion reminds us about our spiritual identity, being the soul, and every religion reminds us about God, gives us information about Him, and shows us the way to approach Him. So that is the purpose of real religion, and that is the link between spirituality and religion. Like religion is the process to understand the spiritual reality and become situated in that reality and develop our loving relationship with the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Thank you, Holiness. We have some questions from our live tweets. Bring it over, please. I'm a bit tied up.
Maybe I can also add a few points to that. But unfortunately, today the religions, most of the religions in the world, have lost its actual essence or actual purpose. And in that respect, it reminds me of a statement by Will Durant, an American philosopher, who mentioned that a religion remains a religion for first few years. Then it becomes a philosophy. Then it becomes a political convenience. And then it becomes a ritual. So unfortunately today, with all due respect to all religions, I will say that they have become mere rituals. They have lost its original essence, which is the process of recognizing our real identity and approach the ultimate goal of our existence. Thank you. And also I want to add, in reality there is only one religion. The different names and different shapes that different religions have got today is simply due to the geographical and linguistic consideration. But in essence, all religions speak about the same principle. In that respect, I would like to state I want to give one example. When our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, was in America, some Catholic priests came to him and asked, why are you converting these Christian boys and girls into Hindus? Prabhupada's response was, no, I'm not converting the Christians into Hindus or Muslims into Jews. I'm simply making better Christians out of the Christians, better Jews out of the Jews, better Muslims out of the Muslims, and better Hindus out of the Hindus. And with full conviction I can say, although I came from a Hindu background, but today I become a real Hindu. And if somebody says, what is your religion? I'll say, whatever way you want to describe it, that's my religion.
How beautiful. Thank you, Your Holiness. How beautiful. Wasn't that just remarkable? So we've been broadcasting across dozens of countries. There are hundreds and thousands of people watching all of you here. I didn't tell you beforehand, I want you to be very conscious about using that mirror over here. But a question. And this question is a spiritual question, which I am going to actually ask. If Zed could answer, please. Okay, here we go. There's no Sanskrit answers required. All right, this makes it easier. Question, Zed.
Me?
Yes, please. You can't sack me, you see, because... Okay. How do we create a revolution of consciousness in a world which is totally lost in chasing social and economic status? How do we create a revolution of consciousness?
That seems to be your... Oh, God. I don't know what I mean. I'm being very frank. Meaning, sort of, it's. Say it again. Maybe I'll get an answer.
So, how do we basically create a revolution of a change in consciousness spiritually, while we find that most of the world are lost in chasing after things like economic development, wealth, money, riches, fame, name, gain?
Well, I think the answer to that question actually Swamiji has given, several times by what he's saying is this division, right, between the self, right, and the materiality, right, that your ability to be able to distinguish between the two, right, which very often is not easy, first of all, and is very confusing for many people, right, but that has got to be perhaps one of the ways, right, that you are able to distinguish, right, between the material and the spiritual, and how that comes about, right?
It's a wonderful answer you gave.
Is it? Well, I hope so.
And that is like distinguish between matter and spirit, and transcend the material domain and come to the spiritual awareness. And that is the revolution of consciousness.
And
and one thing also I would admit here, that when we develop our spiritual awareness, that doesn't mean that we reject the material. Like the superior always includes the inferior. So that domain being superior also includes the material reality. And that creates the perfection of the reality of this world.
I was once asked a question as to, is it good to make money, right? And my answer to that is, yes, it is, but it depends how you make your money, right? And number two, what do you do with your money? Because it's very well to have an organization which wants to look after children. You can't look after children on thin air, You've got to be able to have the money. So, this material thing, right, which people sort of immediately believe is bad, right, and everything else is around it is good, materialism is not necessarily. It's a question of saying success and things like that in life depend on how you behave, right? And as I keep going back, how you behave is what you know, what is right, what is wrong. So if you're going to be making money in a sort of horrible way, you know that, right? You can try to salve your conscience in whichever way you want to, right? But, lots of things in life can't be done without the material, right? Yes. But how you translate that into the spiritual and the values is up to you as a person and human being, and you have the choice. This is not dictated by anybody else. Remember, free choice is what it's all about.
Now you know I asked the question. The saint amongst us, huh? just a final question before the food, which has just been started to be served before it gets cold. One final question. There was okay. Can you do half a question each?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's completely fine. Same table, so you can share the question. So, would you like to go first, and then we very quickly end off over here. Thank you.
A bit of a change to what we've sort of ended up on, but certainly where we started. We spoke about India and the culture of India. I'm curious from all three of your perspectives, what you see as the strength of Indian culture in the corporate environment.
In the corporate environment?
Well, in general, but you speak across international perspectives.
Well, for me, may I just go first?
Yep.
Sort of. For me, what is the strength of India, right? Okay, is in fact India's great diversity. There is no country in the world, right, which has our diversity in terms of race, religion, caste, creed, language, how you look, and things like that, right, okay, all in one place. And that great inclusiveness of India, right, is what is very, very important for the rest of the world, not just for India, because India is actually a beacon of that kind of tolerance. And if I might suggest, that is the big debate which goes on today, right? And, that is India becoming less tolerant? And if that is the case, for me, that would be the most horrible thing I could think of. And so, that great inclusiveness, right, is very important.
So you feel it translates to a robustness, if you like, and a resilience in terms of what India can project?
Yes, and when you consider the amount of poor people we have, right, and yet they're living their daily lives, right, okay, and constantly wanting to get better, right. I think it comes out of this, and India is also a very spiritual place. It is probably the most sort of spiritual country I've ever been in, right, because you have people who come to work, right, and for a fact, right, that they have just been to the temple before coming into work, or they've been to the mosque, or they've been to the, agyari, or wherever it is, right? Not many countries do that, you know what I mean? But but India does that. And that's where I think foreigners find India, certain kind of foreigners find India a very strange place, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's very spiritually imbued as a country. People actually believe in these things.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry,
before the food gets cold and we've actually run out of time, it's already been 10 minutes. I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to cut it here at this point. How can I possibly attempt to summarize? You've all heard from our panelists how it is very possible, and they are the examples of being successful materially, and yet not compromising one's spirituality, one's values, and one's ethics. I cannot summarize anything further because time is limited, but I would like to give you all the opportunity, and I'm really pleased to say that all three panelists will be staying here, joining us for dinner, so you can all sit amongst them. I'll actually request if our three panelists can join three separate tables. And once you all get up, it will be a race for you to join one of those three tables or the neighboring tables. I think that would be the best way so that we can enjoy the remaining hour amongst them. It has been such an honor, really is, sincerely a pleasure to moderate this panel. I feel so tiny, absolutely infinitesimal in front of all of these three. All three of them have been very much instrumental in whatever little I have achieved in my life. And I know for all of you here, everyone has been deeply moved, uplifted, and I think most importantly, enlightened. Thank you all so very much. And a round of applause, please.
No.
For Vanajoy Basu, His Holiness Bhakti Charles Swami, and of course, Mr. Z. Kama.
Right, so since he's put a mic in front of me, I'm actually going to take this liberty. What he has not told you as well is it's his birthday. So could we have another round of applause?
And on that note, dinner is being served. Thank you all very much. Thank you.